See how the needle is just bouncing off that wall? That is the rev limiter. Never hit the rev limiter. You will hurt your time tremendously. This car doesn't have a rev limiter. Oh, see how it sticks right about 82, 8300? The green light just stays like that. It doesn't bounce. So when you shift, it shows a perfect shift. So you think that you've done a perfect shift, but actually you haven't. Hitting that wall and sticking to it is the same thing as hitting the rev limiter, which you're really going to hurt your time, but this is even harder to notice. So that, also be careful, do not do that. For this car, I have it to launch at roughly 5450 RPM. At 5450 I get a good launch and the wheel slip animation comes on and my needle does not drop before it gains. That's ideally what I want. But if you hit right at 5500, it will not you will not get that wheel slip animation. And even though the launch is fairly close and if you hit all the gears right, you're gonna get a pretty good time, you just will probably be off by just maybe 1, 2, 3 thousandths of a second if you were to launch right at the optimal launch RPM where you do get that wheel slip animation. So that's another thing to watch out for. You saw how the needle dropped before gain? That's a bad launch. That's a really terrible launch. If you're launching like that, then you're already bad off the line, so you won't get a good time. If you're launching like that and it's too high and the needle just sticks like that, even though it doesn't drop, but you saw there was no wheel slip animation, that is also a bad launch. So that's gonna hurt your time. Don't do that. See that? It's really close to 5500, 5450, but there was no wheel slip animation. That, if I would have shifted right, it probably would have gave me a decent time, but not the best time. So if you're going for the absolute best time, that wasn't it for your launch. It's probably very hard to see, but if you were to look carefully, you would notice that it did drop maybe 200 RPM before gaining. See, even though I was kind of close to where I wanted to launch at, it still wasn't quite there. And even though I would get a decent time, I wouldn't get the best time. So again, if you're trying to hit the absolute best possible time and you're wondering why you're off by a few hundred thousandths of a second, little things like that will, hurt you in the end. See right there how you didn't see the needle drop back at all, and you got the wheel slip animation? That's what you want to look for in a first gear launch. When you're launching a first gear, you want to look for that. You want the needle to be at the point where the car doesn't have any wheel slip animation, and then it just starts to get wheel slip animation. Say for example at 5500 you get no wheel slip, but the needle doesn't drop before it gains, and at 5450 you do see the wheel slip animation, and it doesn't drop before gaining. That's exactly what you want. But let's say if you launch a little bit lower, like maybe 52, 5300, it's hard to notice, but the needle will drop before gaining, and that you'll probably be off by a little bit, but that's not the best launch. So to do a quick recap, things to avoid: don't hit the rev limiter, avoid that imaginary wall, which is the rev limiter. It's hard to tell. When you're doing a first gear launch, even if the RPM given for the launch is, let's say, 7000, and you notice maybe at 7100 you're still getting the animation and the needle is not dropping, that's still good. So you want to take your launch as high as you can while still getting that wheel slip animation, and your needle not dropping before gaining. That's what you're looking for in a first gear launch. So it's great that people will give you a general RPM to launch at, but it's up to you to know on your device that if they say launch at 7,000 and at 7,000 you see slightly that the needle is dropping, is falling before gaining, then just launch a little bit higher. Try 7,100, try 7,200. Try it to the point where you see that it's a best launch, and that's what I would go by. All the other things I really didn't cover, but they're pretty much common sense and straightforward. Like when you see the over rev animation, that's obviously means you went too far. But on some cars, for the example, the CM F1, you can actually hit the over rev, and if you shift the instant the over rev animation turns on, then that's the best possible shifting you can do for that car. Some cars it will still work, but not all the cars. For example, the Audi, I know for a fact that if you hit the over rev, it will hurt your time, no matter if it's just like a split second, like on the CMF1. So that's, you know, something to avoid or to play with. And again, these are tips for the general majority of the cars. Not every car is gonna follow this rule. I mean, for the Hennessy Venom, the shift lights don't even follow the perfect over rev rule at all. On that car, you're supposed to shift at a certain RPM. Usually what it would be a good shift or a perfect shift. So not every car is the same, and that's just something that you're gonna have to play with.